My dad said to me, find an industry that you think is fun, find a company inside that industry you think is fun, work at it. If it builds a reputation, and if when you're 40 years old, which was meant to be the midpoint of your career, if you want to go off and do something on your own, go off and do it.
Hey Martin, thank you for accepting the invite and welcome to A Glass of Marketing with Joe. The concept is pretty simple. We usually have a glass and we talk about marketing, of course, personal and professional growth. So thank you for accepting the invite. For me, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Pleasure to be here, Gio.
So, for people who don't know you, but probably most of the people that listen to my podcast know you. If you don't know Martin, guys, please unsubscribe now. I'm kidding.
You've lost your audience.
I lost my audience. Can you introduce yourself? We make it easier, probably.
Okay, so Martin Sorrell. I'm currently executive chairman of S4 Capital, which operating brand is Media Monks. I mean, in Milan we have Media Monks there, amongst another 59 offices around the world with 7,500 people. And before that, I was CEO of WPP for 33 years, and before that, I was CFO, Chief Financial Officer of Saatchi & Saatchi for about 7 or 8 years. Then before that, I did lots of other things, but I won't bore you with that.
So can we say you made history in the advertising world? You're part of the history.
My mother, if she was, God bless her, if she was still alive, would say that, but I'm not sure that many other people would. But we did.
To be honest, as a marketing student, before being, a marketing professor and marketing manager, I define myself as a marketing student. As a marketing student, it's an honor to be here with you too. So thank you really for accepting the invite.
Full of the proverb, you should be in advertising, G.
Anyway, probably the first thing I really wanted to ask you is that you've really seen the industry evolving, right? What year was your first job?
In the industry?
Yeah.
85 was the first year of WPP, but I started really in 1976, 77, advising Saatchi with James. And then in 78, Maurice Saatchi approached me and I said, would you like to be CFO of Saatchi? So I spent 7 years until 1985 building up Saatchi. We built it, or they built it, along with my help and Tim Bell's help and many others, into the largest advertising agency in the world. And then I started again in 1985, and the rest is history.
So many years, right? How have you seen the industry evolving? Like in few words, right? How do you see the industry today? From that, what's the biggest difference from today to yesterday?
2 dimensions that really impact the industry. One is geographic and one is technological. And the geographic one, I mean, in 1983, when I was at Saatchi's, before I left to go and start WPP, I read an article in the Harvard Business Review by a marketing professor, Ted Levitt. And what he said was consumers are going to consume everything in the same way everywhere. The globalization of the world and globalization of advertising. In fact, Warren Buffett bought into the advertising agencies because they were cheap at that time, like IPG and Ogilvy and others. But he also bought it, and JWT, but he bought into it to IPG and others because he thought advertising was a royalty on the growth of companies internationally. I remember when I was at Harvard Business School in 1966 to 68, the son of the chairman and CEO of Procter & Gamble was in my class, and Procter & Gamble were regarded as being a global company, and yet only 10% of their sales came from outside the United States. So companies were going global, and at that time, that was one dimension. So geographical growth and the world opening up and globalization taking place was one fundamental shift. And the other fundamental shift is technological. So whether it's the internet, the smartphone, the mobile phone, the smartphone, or now AI or quantum computing or blockchain, whatever it is, or metaverse, those two dimensions really shape the industry. And it's really your ability to work with clients in exploring and exploiting the geographic opportunities and exploring and exploiting the technological opportunities that determine success. So the simple answer to your question is geography and technology.
So do you think we moved from madman to mathman?
Well, I think it's a mixture of the two. I think that I would have that formula would be probably maths men greater than madmen now, much to the chagrin of madmen, or at least equal. You know, in the old days, in the Dot Draper days, the madmen days, the creative community would think Mad Men was greater than the value of maths men, but the balance has changed. I mean, it reminds me very much of the change in attitude to above the line and below the line. You're too young to know what I'm talking about, but when I started WPP in 1985, we went into below the line because they were unfashionable areas: sales promotion, design. These are areas that people thought were below the salt, below the line and below the salt, which in English expression for saying, you know, you're below a status level. And so I would say above the line and below the line was, you know, an important aspect of what we're talking about. But you know, it was also it also reminds me of the difference between creative and media. In the 70s and the 80s, when we saw the rise of media planning and buying, the people in the agency who got the Ferraris and the corner offices were always the creative directors. They were, or the strategy guys or girls, mainly guys at that time, and that came into balance in the 90s. I remember when we formed Mindshare, which was the first global media planning and buying agency, which we formed from the media departments of JWT and Ogilvy. There was tremendous resistance from the strategic and creative side of the business to equalizing the balance between creative and media. So maths and madmen, or mathsmen and madsmen, is similar to below the line and above the line, and similar to the balance between creative and media. They've all shifted. Maths men have become more important, and maths women. Below the line has become more important, and media has become more important. And you could almost argue, if you equate digital with below the line, that maths men have become more important than madmen. That below the line has become more important than above the line, and that finally media has become even more important than creative. I know that's anathema and a heresy to say on this podcast or anywhere else, but the simple fact is all three of those areas have become much more important.
But maybe it's because in the past media was much easier, right? Probably the placements.
No, I don't buy that at all, Jay. No. If I look at the media industry, it'll cross $1 trillion this year. About 300 billion will be linear, about 700 billion will be digital. Of that 700 billion, you know this because of your experience at Lipton and before. Google this year will be about 250 billion of that 700 or that trillion. Meta will be 150, so that's 400 billion. And Amazon will be 60. So 460 out of 700 billion out of $1 trillion, so almost half or almost 2/3 of digital come from those three platforms. I know agencies like to say, and you probably at Lipton like to tell your bosses that it's become more complicated, but I don't think it is. It's become simpler, right? You know, if you take those three platforms plus Alibaba, Tencent, and TikTok or ByteDance, which is the only one to break in, maybe add in Apple and Microsoft and Nvidia obviously now, and Oracle and Salesforce and Adobe. If you throw those in, those are the key key Apple and Microsoft.
But then why you had the shift? Why you had the shift from creative to media, right? Because if you said, creative was bigger and then media got bigger, why you think?
It's painful for people to admit it, particularly if you're a creative or a strategist, but media has become more and more important. I mean, media is where our clients put the money. On that trillion that they invest, I mean, media, we used to call, Owen Gottlieb, who ran Group M at WPP, used to call it media investment management. And that's what it is. You're managing an investment in media. So it's like running a portfolio of stocks in a way, but in much more short term in it. You're trying to find the highest possible returns from a media investment. And that of that trillion, fees probably 100 billion, maybe not even that. Fees, you're a client. You know what agencies are prepared to work at in terms of their yield on billings, and
So you think creativity became less important because if you have enough money to...
No, creativity is still extremely important, but the balance has shifted. I'm exaggerating to make the point, but creative, going back to your analogy, Mad Men and Mass Men, right? Above the line and below the line, and creative and media. There was an imbalance in the relationship. Creativity was all powerful. Above the line was all powerful, and creative was all powerful. There's a balance in everything, and the balance was out of skew.
Do you think now it's more equal, or like we too much into media?
Absolutely, it is more equal. If I look back at my old firm WPP, which is in having distinct difficulties at the moment, the shining light inside WPP is Group M, which is 40% of its revenue and probably more of its profitability. So no, the balance is better. If I look at Publicis, which is of the holding companies, is probably doing the best at the moment. Not probably, definitely. Why is it? Well, one of the reasons, it has good leadership, Artur, etc. It has a good US business. It has a good internal organization, but it has a very strong digital offer and a strong data offer. Now, that doesn't mean its creativity is unimportant. It's obviously very important, but there's a balance. All these things are about balance. And in the 80s and 90s, it got out of balance. Again, above the line was too important. Creative was too important in that sense, and the balance between traditional and digital, was out of whack too. And we've seen the.
Do you think we're losing creativity today? Do you think that we were more creative yesterday when we had the last, or no?
People with the rose-tinted spectacles looking at the past. It's the sort of the survivor mentality at work. No, I think, look, it's still extremely important, but consumers and indeed clients have become much more short-term. I mean, you work in a spin-off from Unilever. Who are the owners of Lipton now?
VCP Capital.
Right. Okay. So a private equity firm, and their horizons are 4 or 5 years. Average life of a CMO in a listed company is 4 or 5 years. Average life of a CMO in a marketing department is probably 2 years. So by necessity, they're almost like presidents and prime ministers. They look at too short, in my view, too short a lifespan. And they're always focused on the short term rather than long term. Creativity has been devalued. We as an industry get rewarded on time spent, which is crazy. In the world of AI compresses the time that you spend. So the procurement department at Lipton is going to say it takes you less time to make an ad. You charge us less, right? It's not about what does that ad create. Your biggest problem at Lipton, I would say, will always be how do I grow the top line faster and faster. How can I get growth into the tea category or the drinks
I mean,
category?
in the art industry in general, because I like to see creativity and advertising as part of the art industry, because at the end of the day, can be art. It's very hard to price a painting, right? It's very hard to price a piece of art. So they are probably time is not the most correct way to do it, because at the end of the day, I would rather buy quality than quantity, right? As well. So how do you price?
Well, I think in a good way, you'd like to buy quality and quantity. You'd like to do both. The technology is enabling you to do things at a scale you never did before. So I think you're getting it. No, look, at the end of the day, I think that the industry is in a better balance than it was a few years ago. But the traditional factors in the agencies, particularly the holding companies, you look at them, there are six. Three are doing okay: Publicis, Omnicom, and Havas, when it gets separated. And three are doing badly. IPG, WPP, and Dentsu. And why IPG and WPP and Dentsu are suffering? Well, they probably don't have as good a data and digital offer, certainly than Publicis. Or the perception is, I mean, you're a client, so you see this. And they have to improve that offer. The other problem that all six have is that still 60% of their revenues or more, 70%, are coming from traditional areas. Linear. Look at the problems that the linear companies are having. Look at the issues that Warner Brothers Discovery, that Paramount, now just announced this morning that they are going to finally do their deal with Larry Ellison's son. You look at the problems that Bob Iger has had since he's come back to Disney. These are all problems of linear companies. That's that 300 billion that I mentioned out of the trillion that is stuck in the linear industries.
If you had to start an agency tomorrow, let's say me and you, tomorrow we start a new agency, right?
Yeah.
What's your advice? How would you do it?
Well, I do exactly what we're doing at S4, which is we have four fundamental principles. The first is digital only. The second is data-driven, which in the world of AI becomes even more important. It's the lifeblood of AI. Faster, we go to market as faster, better, cheaper, and because of AI, more. And the last, we have a unitary company, one brand, one P&L, where everybody can work together.
Do you think smaller agencies can be more competitive than bigger agencies in terms of delivering quality?
Well, they can be. I mean, if you look at the GM review that we've just gone through a review that we won a significant part of, we're the foundational agency to four strategic agencies that are operating at the four brands that GM have. If you look at that sort of indicates that those smaller strategic agencies, and in our case, smaller foundational agency, are better because the two agencies that lost out were IPG and Publicis. Having said that, if you look at the Coke review a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, WPP won, 75%, I think, of their revenues, and they've consolidated everything in the holding company. So you pay your money and you take your choice. I think with AI and with the changes in technology, not to forget the other ones around blockchain, around quantum computing, I think what happens, and AI itself, is these things level the playing field. I mean, although the bigger will benefit, I mean, I think, Google, back off from it, Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia at $3 trillion of market cap are bigger than Italy. In terms, if you equate market, well, you're laughing, but each of them.
But Italy produces more wine.
But each of those companies have a market cap, if you equate market cap to GDP, which is greater than Italy, $3 trillion. And they are countries, and they will get bigger with AI because the amount of money you need to invest in AI and energy and LLMs, etc., and data, and they have data and distribution. So the incumbents have data and distribution. Those are the two big assets you need. So these companies will become even more powerful, but the opportunity in our industry for smaller companies to operate, and remember, those 6 platforms I mentioned, the 3 Western and 3 Eastern. So in the West, Alphabet, Meta, Amazon, something like 60 to 70% of their revenues come from small and medium-sized companies. And when you see the developments that Google and Meta are making, for example, PMax at Google or Advantage Plus at Meta, they're programs for small and medium-sized businesses to develop their media planning and buying. So I think technology will be a disadvantage for some of the smaller companies because of the scale of resources needed. But what those technology companies produce, the technologies and the techniques, will be of great benefit.
Yeah, on the other side, I mean, I feel like the platforms are trying to kill the small agencies, because if you think about it, as you just said, with AI, like a performance max campaign, you can launch a campaign in 3 clicks. You don't need a media planner, an art director. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's a good point. We'll get into AI and its impact. I think there are 5 areas where AI is impacting our business or will impact our business. But, I think you have to be a little bit careful. I think the platforms will build closer relationships. I think you're absolutely right. It's what I've been saying. People disagree with me and they would disagree with you. But what they will need agencies as validators. The larger enterprise clients are not big. You wouldn't give all your media budget to Rupert Murdoch, and no offense meant to Rupert Murdoch, but you wouldn't say just get on with it and distribute it for me because you would favor his properties. So you don't do that with Google, or you don't do that with Meta, or you don't do it with Amazon. So you need us, but it's very much where we started S4 6 years ago. We started with Mighty Hive, which had a very close relationship with the platforms and was a recommender, an adjudicator, and a validator for the platforms. So I don't think the platforms, when I say publicly the platforms are getting closer to the clients, the agencies get hyper-neurotic about it, and some of the platforms say we aren't, for the obvious reason. They don't want to prejudice their relationships with the big agencies. But I think what you just said is inevitable. That when you look at Sorrell, when you look at Lightrix, when you look at Runway, look at other things, all these platforms, text to video or voice to video, you can envisage a machine that you will talk to and you'll say, I want a campaign to do X and I want, creative like this. It'll spit out the creative, and that creative will then be fashioned for media planning and buying channels. You have your plan and your buy, and at the other end of the machine now comes your ready-made campaign, and it's planned and bought. Because certainly on media planning and buying, which is where you started in your career, that can be reduced to a series of algorithms. The output will be far better than we get now, because the machine can deal with all the variables. But the way that it's made, so you won't need, I think you started in MediaCom, you said, with WPP.
No, I started IPG media brand, actually.
Okay, I don't know how many people there are with media brands, but WPP, I think in their 3 brands is about 35,000 people. You won't need those 35,000 people. You might need probably half of that, maybe even less, and they will have better data, and the clients will be happier because they will have better results as a result.
Yeah, no, I think it's clear that AI will, of course, is already affecting the bottom line and the top line, right? The bottom line, because it's bringing more productivity, so you need less people, as you said. So I think the topic there is how do we upskill and reskill the others, right? On the other side, it's going to have an effect on the top line, because, of course, it's bringing also more creativity. But don't you think we still need, and we will need, the human creativity to be disruptive? Or you think AI will create eventually?
I do think. Let's examine the 5 areas. Visualization and copywriting. There is no doubt already we are starting to see an impact. That's built on time. The time is being reduced to produce an ad. It doesn't take weeks, it takes hours. So we can see significant savings. So when we pitch AI, we pitch a 30% cost reduction at least in making ads. That's one. The second area is hyper-personalization at scale, what GM has just done in the work that we've done for other clients, like BMW in Europe, where what we've done is you've got this two-level structure where you've got a strategic creative agency, and in the case of GM, across their 4 brands, or one on each of the 4 brands. And then you've got a foundational agency which takes the big idea and interprets it into the creative and spits out the creative, in GM's case, initially in the US and then ultimately, I suppose, around the world. So what you're seeing is a change in the model. In that case, we are being compensated in many cases on output, not time spent. So we will charge on a per asset basis, and that means we'll be using more assets. So revenues will rise, actually, and number of people employed will probably rise. That's the second area. The third area we've already talked about, media planning and buying. I think there will be a reduction in employment, but the results will be super efficient and much better. The fourth area is general efficiency. So if I give you an example, we have an exclusive arrangement with NVIDIA in outside broadcasting, together with AWS and Adobe, where if we're filming a football match, let's say we wanted to do an outside broadcast on England versus Holland on Wednesday night in the Euros, we need a truck, which we will pay $10 million, $9 million for, amortize it over 5 years, $2 million a year. We can provide, using AWS, Adobe, and NVIDIA and their solution, AI cloud solution, we can do that for 100,000, 200,000. So you're talking about a very significant cost reduction as a result. Great interest to linear broadcasters. So for agency and client, there's going to be a reduction in cost. That's a good area. And the fifth area, which I think is the most exciting, is deploying knowledge across the organization. Deploying knowledge across it. So making sure that we implement knowledge transfer, flattening organizations. Jensen Huang has 51 direct reports, apparently. He doesn't have one-to-one meetings. He sets 5 objectives for each of his direct reports and then progress chases the results. So it's a different way, and I think that's going to flatten organizations, and it's going to make organizational spans much broader, and I think will make organizations much more efficient.
Moving to another topic. Would you rather have people working from home, having goal-oriented people that want to be more productive, they can work from home, or have people in the office where, they can talk to each other, have beers and pizza and be more creative?
Or be more productive. I think in the beginnings of COVID didn't cause this. This was happening anyway, but COVID speeded it up. At the beginnings of COVID, I think we're a digital native organization, digital only, not even digital first. I think we were more productive than we had been before. I think over the years, it's become tougher. And I'm not convinced that, AI is going to, I think, result in us having more holidays. I think there will be less employment opportunities as a result. John Maynard Keynes, a very famous economist, wrote a pamphlet, I think it was in 1933, about automation and its impact, that we would have more holidays. Well, he was right, but he was 100 years too early. And I think AI will. But I'm not convinced, Gio, that having people distributed is necessarily the right thing. I feel that our organization is less productive today than it was at the beginning of COVID in 21, let's say, when I think, we reacted, we were panicking about the impact of COVID. And then we thought we saw animation, for example, go vertical when COVID, the online events go vertical. There was and everything got sucked forward. in COVID, as we saw with many of the tech companies and others. So I'm not convinced. I think maybe there's a happy medium, which is, maybe it's 4 days in the office or 3 days and 2 out, whatever the right. I think a lot of people think now we'll have 3-day weekends. I think in Greece, I read an article a day or so ago that they're going for 6-day weeks. The Chinese work 9-9-6, 9 to 9, 6 days a week. Well, that's what people say. So I'm not convinced.
In your ideal world, how many days should a weekend last?
So, I mean, this thing about work-life balance. I mean, one of the guys I used to work for many years ago, Mark McCormack, was a lawyer who loved golf. He met Arnold Palmer. He said to Arnold Palmer, "You need somebody to manage your business affairs." So he married his hobby, golf, his love, golf, with work. So if you can get to the stage where it isn't work, it isn't a 4-letter word beginning with W, but it's it is life, a 4-letter word beginning with L. There is no balance, and there's no division. And I think if you can make what you do fun. I mean, my dad said to me, find an industry that you think is fun, find a company inside that industry you think is fun, work at it. If it builds a reputation, and if when you're 40 years old, which was meant to be the midpoint of your career, if you want to go off and do something on your own, go off and do it.
So how do they usually say? They say the first 20 years you work hard, and then from the 40s you start creating your own, right?
Well, it was you find something you enjoy, find a company in it you enjoy, build a reputation, work hard, obviously, and be diligent. And then if you fancy doing something on your own, go off and do something on your own. I think maybe his advice, probably you should do it when you're 30 or 35, not wait until you're 40, but it was good advice.
Do you suggest doing things your own, or would you rather, as some people say, get rich slowly? You know what I mean? Like in big corporates.
Well, it depends on how you're made. I mean, you can get rich corporately by being aggressive and being ambitious. I think the more the question is, do you want to have 100% of a small thing or 10% of a big thing? I think that's what you're getting. I like scale, so I like scale, and Sarches was scale, WPP was scale, and S4 we're starting to get scale after 5 or 6 years, but we're still quite small. We're only 7,500.
It's more
people.
for the adrenaline, right? Because I mean, when you start something from the scratch, right, and you make it big, it's like you're making history. It's not about the money anymore.
Adrenaline. I think if you want to move quickly, you have to do it through M&A. You can't. Organic growth is always too slow. So you have to build it through M&A.
If you had to give a couple of advices to today's marketing students, what would you tell them?
Well, I've always said learn Chinese and learn code. And I mentioned geography and technology, and therefore that's about geography, the rise of China, and that's about technology, learn code. You probably don't have to learn Chinese or code anymore because of AI.
Excellent.
Because AI will do it for you. The third thing I would say is learn Spanish. I shouldn't have. I shouldn't.
So you can go to Ibiza in summer.
No, so you can go to Latin America, which is probably the most underestimated continent in the world.
Why?
Well, because the people there are super good, super young, and they have technological and creative capabilities. Going back to like we talked about creative and media and Mad Men and Mass Men and above and below the line, I would say the West or the global North and the global South as the people. So people underestimate the creative and technological quality of the global South. I was very struck by it. I was at a conference in Rio a few weeks ago, and I heard President Lula speak. Not that I think it was the best speech I've ever heard, but it made the point that there is this frustration or this concern that the global South, that the global South feels about the global North. The hegemony that the US and Western Europe have had, the five big nations, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK, plus North America, the domination they've had, there is a frustration, there is a dislike of the global North that is, I think, palpable. And the simple fact is that the E7, that's the emerging seven nations, are bigger than the G7 by GDP. And the E6, which you exclude China, and the G6, if you include the US, the E6 is still bigger. So the rise of India, the rise of Indonesia, the rise of China, which all three economies will be in the top five, and it will be the US and Germany, the other two, tells you by 2050, that tells you that the world is changing. So learn Spanish and learn Chinese because the world's changing. So again, I come back to that geography and technology being the two dimensions that you've got to think about in relation to how things work.
Also, if you notice, most of the best creative campaigns are from South America, right? Like most
Well,
of the Cannes Lions, yeah.
well,
Why do you think? Why do you think
I think
they so good?
I think they enjoy life, and I think they're very good at football as well. The reason why Buenos Aires is so good is because of River Plate and Boca Juniors.
I really like when you said that because they enjoy life. I'm a big fan of, enjoying life because I want to prove, as you said, work life, there is not really work life balance, that there should be work life integration, right? So if you do what you like, you have fun while you do it, you're more productive. So this is also one of the reasons why I started this video podcast, and I call it a glass of marketing, because I want to kind of prove people that you can have, a glass of wine, have, laugh with people, have fun, but at the same time be serious, right? So you don't have to, you know what I mean? Right.
A good thing about work from home is the boundaries between life, between work and family, sort of are blurred. Now, some people think that's a problem. For example, the new prime minister here said, he's stopping at 6 o'clock on a Friday. Now he's doing it because his wife is Jewish and he wants to go home for the Sabbath. But people then say, he's turning off at 6. He's not turning off at 6. He's doing it for religious reasons with his wife, which I think is, as a Jew, I think is totally understandable and a great thing. But he's also doing it because he gets, a little bit of balance into it. But he also knows that at 8 o'clock, if there's a missile attack in Kiev, the Russians are hitting Kiev again, he'll be called to the phone. So it's not sort of getting rid of the responsibility. But I think what's interesting about work from home, work from anywhere, is it blurs the lines. And that's where those who think we can be more productive may well be right. I'm sitting there on a Saturday. I haven't shut off my internet. I haven't shut off thinking about work. And something pops up on a Saturday afternoon and I deal with it. So it may be that we become more productive as a result, but I'm not, as I said before earlier on in this podcast, I'm not absolutely convinced of it at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we are in the always on society, so I think then it's up to you to turn it off and turn it on, right? Because, you can decide to work on, I don't know, on Sunday afternoon, but then you can take the Monday morning off to, I don't know, drive your kid to school, right? So I really like that. I think if you know how to balance that, and probably we need some education also in how to balance
Yeah, but
work and life.
you lose the friction of conversation, you lose the friction of engagement. So you have to make sure that people have the opportunity. I mean, I've seen a lot of the work done at Harvard Business School, for example, on how work from home, work from anywhere can be productive by having social interactions that drive contact and transfer of knowledge and meeting people on a regular basis. I'm not convinced that is necessarily right. there's research to show that if you're inside a company, you tend to talk to people that are within 10 meters of your desk and not go beyond that. So it's a mythology that, you have all this contact and you get all this knowledge. And I think there is something in that too. But I'm not, maybe it's because I'm 79 and an old man, that maybe I can't see it.
No, I mean, if you ask me, I prefer working remotely because I can travel, I can do more of what I like. But at the same time, when I look at personal growth and professional growth, right? I think professionally, you can grow online today because you can ask AI, you can read a lot, you can watch YouTube videos, you can watch podcasts, you can listen to things. So you can actually learn a lot. Just by sitting on your desk and from your laptop. I think what you're really missing is the personal growth, because I'm also practicing public speaking, like at university. I started speaking at events, and it's a new challenge, it's a big adrenaline, and I think this is what makes you grow personally as well, because when you speak in front of 100 people offline, it's way different than speaking in front of 1,000 people online, right? So I think what the real danger, in my opinion, of the working remotely is that you lose the contact with the humans, and you kind of put yourself in a bubble, which of course, if you know to use the bubble, amazing, because of course you can be a social human being. Like, I go out, maybe I work from home, but after 7 I try to meet my friends, I go to the gym, I go to my wine tasting classes and everything, right? So I find ways, and I go to events, so I find ways, right? But probably I'm the 10%. Probably the 90% of people become just lazy, right?
Sure.
So I think that's the danger.
Well, anyway, there are two schools of thought. We'll see. We'll see how it develops over time. Whatever it means, offices are not going to be as full as they were before.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're becoming living rooms now, where you can go there.
Yeah, the case in agencies, it used to be office costs were about 7% of net revenue. I think probably now down to 2 or 3.
Agencies are saving a lot of money, right, as well, because
Yes.
you need to have less space. On the other side, any quick advice to CMOs, like chief marketing officers today, top things they need to consider?
So I have 3 things I think are really important. The first is agility. I mean, people talk about. I mean, you're at Lipton's. That was part of Unilever. And I would guess that as part of a private equity firm now, it is much more agile than it was when it was part of Unilever.
Yeah.
And of course, Unilever now has a new CEO who's trying to make the business even more agile. So agility is key. People talk about it, they very rarely do it. That's number one. Number 2, and you may find this strange coming from somebody who's in an agency, been in the agency business, I think clients have to take back control in a world where third-party cookies are being deprecated, and so you have to move back to the platforms and use signals from the platforms plus your first-party data. And Apple have changed the rules around IDFA to cohorts rather than individual IP addresses. You have to have more control of your data, and in the AI world, you have to have more control of your data, control of your functions. So I mentioned GM before, that model, that 2-tier strategic marketing foundational agency model, that model also will result in more functions being internal. And the third area is what I just touched on, first-party data. That is absolutely critical for performance in a digital world where digital is already 70%, as I said, of media spending, and will be even greater over the coming years. So I would say those are the 3 things: agility, take back control. In-housing will become more and more important. We have 3
The
models.
founder of WPP is saying to in-house guys, like.
We have 3 models: embedding our people inside clients, the outsource model, and the in-house model. But you're smiling, but it's important.
Why do you think clients don't in-house that much? You think it's a political choice?
Well, no. There are 2 things. One is it's difficult to get people to work just on one vertical or one category. They like variety. Good people like variety. And the second thing is keeping up with the technology is quite difficult. So there are 2 areas of after-sales service for in-housing. We were the subject of a Harvard Business School case study on in-housing with Sprint and T-Mobile, when we in-housed the media. So no, there are really big opportunities for in-housing. There's big opportunities for the halfway house, which is embedding your people inside clients. And then, of course, there's always cases where outsourcing would be good. But I think the reason, one of the other reasons why, is the CFOs and procurement, or the CFOs in particular, don't want the headcount internally. So they want to keep the headcount outside of the company.
Yeah, because it's easier in terms of cost, right? You can cut it much faster. And then moving to the other, part of this podcast, which is more like personal growth and, work-life balance, definition of success. I would like to know, what's your daily routine? I mean, you must be very busy, right? I mean, so many things to do. What's your schedule? How do you manage that?
I get up in the morning at 6. I watch morning television, usually CNBC. If I'm in America, CNBC as well. I usually go into the office. I have a breakfast meeting at 8 o'clock. Might go into the office about 9:15. Meetings, 2 or 3 meetings in the morning, maybe a lunch out, sometimes a lunch at the desk, 2 or 3 meetings in the afternoon, and then I try and avoid dinner, but sometimes I have dinners, obviously. So that will be my schedule, and then at night I watch TV, go to bed. I mean, I read all the newspapers I can lay my hands on, and read all the information I can get my hands on, magazines, etc.
What's your hobby? Like, do you have any hobby? Do you do anything in your free time?
Hobby is what we're talking about.
Amazing. I feel the same.
Well, I don't play cricket. I watch my grandson play cricket now, but I like cricket.
Do you have like a personal philosophy? Do you have something that gets you going? Like when you are in hard times and you go through something, which can be either work or like personal.
I think the thing that my father wrote me a letter before he died, and about what I should and shouldn't do, and I think whenever I'm looking for strength, I read that letter.
Amazing. And then the last thing is, what's your definition of success? Because, for many people, success means many things. It can be becoming billionaires, becoming only millionaires, going out and trying all the wine of the world, or just fishing, traveling. What's your definition of success?
No, I think obviously family. There are 3 things you have to do. Family is really obviously very important. Career. And society, and it's balancing those 3 things. So I think the most successful people, the people who managed to balance those 3 things. When I was in business school, the guy teaching it, there was a guy called George Cabot Lodge, who was a son of Henry Cabot Lodge, who was Secretary of State in the Eisenhower administration, I think it was. And we didn't think George was a very good professor. He taught business planning, I think it was called, in the first year, and it was a compulsory course, and we didn't think he was a very good teacher. And in order to get an A on his course, all you had to do was reproduce a diagram that he had, which was 3 circles, a Venn diagram intersecting: family, career, society. Actually, he got it in 1. I reproduced the diagram in my exam and got an A-, so I remember. Business planning in the environment. And he's right. He was right. Success is getting a balance. All the things you just quoted are success in one area, not the other. So it's family, it's career, and it's society. And the real successful people, and they may not agree, and they may not think it is success, are the people that can get a balance between all those 3.
Martin, thank you so much for your time. Honestly, it was an honor having you here. I would say cheers to success and cheers to balance then.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.